Welcome. I'm Leslie Canham.
I'm Mary Gavoni.
I'm Linda Harvey.
I'm Olivia Wan, and together we are the Compliance Divas.
Welcome to the Compliance Divas podcast. This is Leslie Canham, and I am so excited to be your moderator today on our podcast, Teamwork Advantage, How Team Building and Team Connection Drives Performance, with one of our favorite guests on the Compliance Divas podcast, Katherine Eitel-Belt. Today's program is on how to use team building activities to reduce stress, improve interpersonal relationships with coworkers, and increase productivity, prevent errors, and why you should incorporate team building activities into your systems and meetings. I'd like to introduce our guest, Katherine Eitel-Belt. It is my privilege to introduce this truly remarkable leader in the field of unscripted leadership communication and team transformation, Katherine Eitel-Belt. With over 35 years of experience, Katherine has empowered hundreds of organizations across the U.S., Canada, and the U.K., including giants like Procter & Gamble, Care Credit, Henry Schein. She's recognized globally as dentistry's unscripted leadership communication coach and is one of the fewer than 17% of speakers worldwide who has earned the prestigious Certified Speaking Professional designation. Katherine's innovation frameworks, such as her Leadership Conversations trifecta and the ARCH Conversation Framework, have become essential tools for leaders seeking to break down dysfunction, build alignment, and foster accountability within their teams. Her insights have been featured on top leadership podcasts and documentaries, and her upcoming book, Lead Yourself, Lead Your Team, is poised to be a game changer for anyone serious about creating high-performing cultures. Today, Katherine will share her proven strategies to help you communicate with clarity and inspire action every time you lead, whether with your team, your clients, or your community. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Katherine Eitel-Belt. And before we do, I just want to say good morning to Katherine. And Katherine, thank you so much for being with us today. Not only are you an extreme communications leader, but you have helped many, many dental professionals and consultants in communicating effectively with not only their audiences and their clients. And I just want to give you a heartfelt thank you, at least from my part of being a dental consultant, and how much you have helped me with training with my clients and audiences.
Oh, that just warms my heart. And like I said, what a great way to start my week on Monday morning with the two of you, Mary and Leslie. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And I couldn't be more excited to be here with your listeners and to, just talk about this important subject. So, yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, Mary's going to lead off with a few questions for you.
Okay.
First of all, when is the book going to be available?
Well, we're hoping in the fall. As we record this, we're here in April, so our fingers are crossed that by end of September, 1st of October, we should have a date in the next couple of weeks. So
fabulous, and we'll keep our listeners informed because we're
very exciting.
Wait to read it. Can't wait. Well, Katherine, we've had this discussion before about how many doctor leaders, first of all, don't really want to be a leader in the practice, and how when they schedule team retreats or they schedule continuing education, they want what they will describe sometimes as the meat and potatoes. They want clinical things. They want what's going to drive revenue. And when you talk about team building, they kind of go, that to me is a waste of time. So help us understand why you need to have that foundation, why you need that team building first and foremost to be successful.
Yeah, well, I've heard the same thing you've heard, Mary. I've heard that this is kind of a soft skill and we don't really have the budget for it. And, we want to, like you said, talk about things that are really going to impact the bottom line. But it turns out they just don't know what we know. And that is there's a ton of research to show that it doesn't matter the clinical skill that you have brought into your practice. It doesn't really matter the systems that you've put in place. Humans have to run those. Humans have to do that dentistry, care for those patients, align with those systems. And some of the recent research I read said that on average, American workers are spending 3 hours a week either thinking about conflict, meaning they're thinking about the person who hurt their feelings or the person they think isn't carrying out their part of the system or isn't doing their share of the work or whatever the stress is, whatever the conflict is. They're either thinking about it or they're actively embroiled in the argument with the person 3 hours a week. So when you add that up, that's 2 weeks a year. And I contend that that's per employee per year. So if they're thinking about that, what are they not thinking about? They're not thinking about the patient in front of them. They're not thinking about the room that they need to turn over. They're not thinking about the system that is maybe needs attention. They're not thinking about that. They're thinking about this argument or someone hurt my feelings or whatever it is. And so imagine if there was some technology we could buy that would get back 2 weeks per employee per year of productive focus, we would think that was a game changer. And that's what this work is. When you create greater connection and easier, more mature communication between your team members, you get that time back. And so I think it has a hard hit on the bottom line. I mean, that's I think proof that it actually is a really important skill.
Wow, those are scary numbers. But we see that, even though when Leslie and I are in practices, we're looking more focused on their infection control protocols and other
Right.
compliance issues, we still can't ignore because we experience that kind of dysfunction. And I remember working with a client, a long-term client a number of years ago, who called me one night and said, I don't understand. Patients are leaving my practice
Mm.
and my revenue is down by about 15%, which is an alarming number considering it was a very high performing practice at one point, and I just don't know what's going on. So we surveyed patients, and the patients said that the climate there was so tense from interpersonal reactions of the team that they couldn't stand it anymore, and they left in
Yeah.
droves. So this doctor then said, whoa, wait a minute, let's fix this. And we worked really hard on that. And then the doctor followed up with those patients who had left and said, I want you to know, this is what we've done. Will you please come back and give us a try again? Because we appreciate that you shared
That
your
feedback.
information. It was amazing. It was amazing.
And the reverse is also true. When it's evident to patients that teams respect each other, they admire each other, they work collectively together really and seamlessly, that feeling is what causes people to relax, to trust, to refer. It's an investment into your practice and into your patient care.
That is just absolutely amazing. And so I'm guessing that Leslie has some questions for you about how do we get there? How do we do the team building, and how do we have some good, as you call them, courageous conversations?
Mhm.
It's so right on the money. When you have a culture that's toxic, you can feel it, and patients can feel it. And of course, I never considered the having the patient be relaxed in the chair, but I did consider the trust factor. So now I'm looking at these other avenues that are of comfort to the patient. In addition to team members who admire and respect each other, that level, that consistent level of being relaxed and having team members who are seem like they not only care for each other but are educated and have
Mhm.
the information top of mind on procedures that they're collectively working together. So when we get back to how to get to that point, What makes the difference between, let's say, a training icebreaker and actual real team building where we can get to that point where patients can see it, where team members exude that confidence and that trust among each other?
Well, I mean, it just stands to reason you've got to find a way to get to the real issues. It's no surprise that people struggle with this. And I kind of want to remove the sort of stereotype that we've put on people who don't work well together. There sometimes is this feeling of, well, they're just immature, or, they don't really care about other people. They're selfish or something. I actually think most people are good and most people want to do well and try to do their best. Most people. But I ask often in big audiences, how many of you grew up in a home where you had parents or grandparents that modeled for you a really healthy way to manage conflict on an ongoing basis? And very few, there's always a few, but very few hands go up. And then I'll say, how many of you have taken a class in how to address something on a team level or with an individual on a team in a constructive way, how to hold a boundary, how to ask and make a request that something be done differently? How many of you have taken a class on how to do that? And again, a couple of hands will go up, but most of the people have not. So think about, we've thrown all these people in together, different generations, different work experiences, different ethnicities, different cultures, all these different things are thrown into this one location, and no one has had good examples growing up, and no one has taken a class in it. I mean, the one thing you might do an implant one day and a clear aligner the next, but one thing you're going to do every day is communicate from the moment you get there till the moment you leave. And that one thing we don't work on. So, how this happens with teams isn't, as you alluded to, Leslie, an icebreaker. I don't blame owners and managers for not wanting to invest money in something that is not going to impact the business in a positive way. And so, while I do think that the team going out and having fun can have a great positive impact on how the team enjoys one another, gets to know one another, all of those can be very healthy and very, very good. But what we're talking about is, how do we actually move the marker on how people communicate and give them the ability to say the things that are on their mind, or to articulate the things they need to be different and hold a boundary or hold a high standard. I have dentists or managers tell me all the time, I want to have these conversations, Catherine. I do. I want to raise our standards. I want people to be on time. I want them to have a positive attitude. I want them to follow the systems. But I'm afraid that if I have this conversation and it doesn't go well, these people are going to quit. And I'm going to be 6 months trying to replace them, and my business cannot survive it. So what that tells me is they're afraid. There's fear in having these conversations that they won't go well. So I contend, I mean, that sort of begs the idea there must be only two choices: have the conversation with the other person and risk losing it, or don't have the conversation and struggle with the current status. And so I would like to recommend that there is a third option, and that is not necessarily a team day, at the movies or at the bowling alley, but not that that would hurt. But if you can craft a day or a morning even where we have fun, but we are able to get down to where are the disconnects? Where are the disconnects between what the owner and management need and what is actually the reality in the practice, right? What the standards are, not just for clinical practice and not just for infection control and other systems, but what are the needs communicatively and in terms of patient service and all of those things. So how do we set our standards and feel capable of calling people to a higher standard? And that really requires, I think, finding someone who knows how to craft a day where you have activities that are simultaneously connecting and enjoyable, but they open up the lines of communication about the really hard conversations, and that you do that on a platform of safety, of trust, and of honesty and integrity, And so I think having number one, finding a facilitator that knows how to do that, or even if what you can afford to do is have someone help you draft that day or craft that day, construct that agenda in a way that when you deliver it or your manager delivers it, it is it is professionally orchestrated and professionally organized so that we actually land that plane of getting to the real issues in a constructive way and still having an enjoyable time doing it.
Catherine, that reminds me of a podcast that you provided for us, podcast number 119,
Mm.
where you shared with us courageous conversations with the OSHA and infection control coordinator. And it gives just a little taste of why holding that high standard is so important. That was just a tiny little script of conversation that our listeners may want to go back to find that place where we say, this is the bar that we're setting for our practice. This is what we want to adhere to. This is what we want our team members to strive for. But what I'd like to do is find out from you how a practice effectively sets a plan for team building in a session to ensure that it doesn't really become like a gripe session or a waste of time. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things have come up for me as we've been talking, and that is, you know, people who are disconnected don't trust each other and won't be honest. So one of the things that, like when you talked about icebreakers are all about connecting people to other people, and usually they do that. But what they don't do is connect people to the actual content or the actual situation that we came to solve. So training exercises that are expertly facilitated do that. They keep the piece of icebreakers that we like, that kind of people to people connection and getting people connected just as human beings. But then it adds this layer of it also connects those people to what we came here to solve. And that's a very different kind of exercise. And so that's really what we're talking about. But how do we do this? So I think it requires that the owners and leadership team, anybody on the leadership team, understands the difference between a couple of conversations. So I've developed a hierarchy of conversations, of three conversations, and we call it the leadership conversation trifecta. And I'm happy to share a document that sort of shows those and explains those with your listeners later. But at the top of this hierarchy is the invitation conversation. Then the second one is a coaching conversation. And the third is a courageous conversation. And they're in that order for a reason. When you wrap your head as a leader around this idea of nobody has to do anything. They don't have to follow these protocols. They don't have to be here at 7:45 for the meeting. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to work in a company or in a practice that has ongoing growth check-ins every month and pushes people to constantly be in a coaching contract with their manager and working on getting better at all times. They don't have to work in a place like that. If we get that out of our head and instead we insert this idea that we are inviting people who can hear this invitation into this level of excellence, into this level of teamwork, into this level of attitude, into this level of growth, into these big audacious goals. We're inviting people to decide if they align with that or not. And if they do, and they want to join us, then we couldn't be happier. And the next step will then be to put them into growth conferences and into coaching check-ins ongoing. And as long as they're growing and working on the skills they need to achieve that vision, they kind of stay in that loop. If ever we don't, then we occasionally have to drop down to that courageous conversation, that more confrontational, that handles the confrontation of we've got to have a certain result, we've got to have a system met, those kinds of things. But if leaders can understand the difference between a demand and an invitation, things change. Team building opens up because now what you have is an entire team of people who chose. And maybe more importantly, we've actually articulated that choice. They have said, I choose. I understand the invitation. So literally how we do it, if we're coaching in the practice, we help the owner get very, very clear on what the invitation is. They often think they're clear, but they're not. And confusion is one of the biggest barriers to team bonding and team building and teams working well together. They all are operating on a different idea of what we're supposed to do. And so that confusion is often at the core of the disconnect. So clarity is king. And so the first thing we do is get the owner very, very clear on that invitation. Then we help them practice presenting that to their team at a team retreat. And in our clients' work, they do it a minimum of once a year. But really, we need to go back to the invitation anytime someone's working for us that is unclear what we're building, where we're going, what the standards are, where we might issue that invitation to come and join us. So what happens when they do that is we try to make sure it's clear, but it's also inspirational. Like I say to them, remind them why you did that, why you started this practice, why you love this work. Remind them why you're excited about the future and what you all can collectively do together. So there's clarity, but there's also inspiration. And once we invite them in, then that next week, the manager meets with every single person individually and says, "What do you think? Are you in? Are you accepting this invitation?" And if they say yes, which most people do, then we say, "Okay, so then you're stepping into now our next level, which will be our coaching agreements. And I would like to start here, or where would you like to start?" And everyone is always then in a coaching agreement. So that creates this feeling of we're all working toward the same goal, we're all working toward the same vision, and it's a very different paradigm for most leaders. They feel like they need to find a way to demand better. I contend they need to find a way to invite better people, invite people into a bigger, better, clearer story, have them actually verbalize their choice, and you remove victims from your practice, which is a beautiful place to be.
Oh, it is. I wrote down invite versus demand. Oh,
Yes,
that is the game changer.
it is. Mhm.
This is our practice and this is what you must do. Like, no, this is our practice and you can choose to,
We respect it, right? We
yeah.
respect
And
that you're a professional, and we respect that this may not be a good alignment for you for whatever reason. If you don't judge it, if you just say, "Look, we're not judging it. We're just saying we've chosen. This is our standard. This is our standard for HIPAA and OSHA. This is our standard for patient care. This is our standard for technology." There's a lot of practices who aren't going to use the technology that we use. We are. And so we're not apologizing for it. We're not justifying it. We're not begging you to, we're just saying we're going here. With or without you, we're going here. We want you to be with us. We really, really do. And we're hoping your answer is yes, but you must decide that. And if you do, be very clear the work that you're stepping into. Be very clear that you will have a hand on your back pushing you into higher levels of growth. And you chose it, not us.
I would guess that that takes away some of maybe the fear factor for teams in doing something new or adapting to a
Yeah.
new technology because now they really have the picture of where it is. And for the leader to have the clear picture of where it is that we're going. Uh,
Yes.
I can't remember the name of the author of the book, but the title is Get Everyone on Your Team Rowing in the Same Direction. And the front cover of the book is, team in a rowboat, and the
Yeah.
captain is looking one way and the team's rowing the opposite way.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. I remember Judy Kay, our beloved Judy Kay that just recently retired. She talked about, are you a rower? Are you a rider? Are you selecting the vision? I always loved that analogy, and it's so true.
Absolutely. Well,
Mhm.
Catherine, thank you so, so much for your wisdom and your experience and your approachability. And I think that's one of the strengths that you bring to our industry is that it's not, I am the almighty consultant and you must do what I say. It's like, I'm here to collaborate with you and help you to become better. I'm not going to make it happen for you. I'm going to teach you how to do it. And that is just so, so, so
Oh.
powerful.
Well, I love that. I love seeing the light bulbs go off, not just in the owners and the leadership team that hires us, but watching the light bulbs go off in the team and them saying, I've always had agency. I've always had the ruby slippers on. I've always had choice. This is my career. And I can build it any way I want, and that empowers them and strengthens them. And that's when you put a group together that is empowered and strengthened and in charge of their own careers, you get an amazing team. And at these team retreats that we facilitate, we see that sort of, it's almost like you see it blossom right before your eyes, where they start to go, oh, I've been in my silo and I've put myself sort of in this stance, like I'm against, the hygiene department's not, against the admin department. Once we break those barriers down, and we all want the same thing. We want respect. We want to feel successful. We want to feel like our work is important and making a difference. And we want to feel seen and heard. And when you can level that up and open that up, which we do often in these team, we don't call them team building or team bonding. They're a team calibration retreat. And that's the goal, is to have fun and get everybody feeling good about working there, but most importantly, to calibrate the where we're going and the standards, and kind of, I always say, who we need to be or become along the way, to calibrate that with the individual human beings that are on this team. And it can be fun. And people have said that day changed my career. It changed how I thought about the power of my career. And that changes teams. So, yeah, so such good work.
Catherine, folks will want to get a hold of you after hearing this. I'm excited about getting in touch with you regarding some more team building ideas for my own presentations and
Yeah.
workshops with my clients. But to get a hold of you, your website is www.lionspeak.net. And your email is info@lionspeak.net. We're going to have that along with your phone number on our show notes. And I know you had mentioned that you're going to give away an article. So
Yeah.
have something on team calibration retreats that our listeners can actually download. What we're going to do is make that all available in the show notes. And we thank you so much for your time with us. Here at the Compliance Divas, we bring clarity and simplicity to compliance by navigating regulatory compliance to keep you on course. And our listeners can submit questions by email to support@thecompliancedivas.com. The resources that we mentioned during our podcast episode are listed in the show notes. And if you'll subscribe to the Compliance Divas podcast, you'll never miss an episode. And we'd love for you to leave us some feedback on the podcast on your podcast app. With that, we close this wonderful presentation with the famous Katherine Eitel-Belt.